Welcome to Bringing Back the Wild. In each episode, Mike Arnold explores how science, tradition, and hands-on conservation come together to protect the wild places and wildlife we care about. Your host, Mike Arnold, is a professor of genetics, a lifelong hunter, and a conservation biologist. As a genetics professor who spends as much time in the woods as he does in the lab, Mike studies wildlife, has a passion for hunting, and cares deeply about conservation. On this podcast, Mike dives into the science and stories behind bringing wildlife species back and keeping wild places wild. Sponsors of this episode include Dallas Safari Club, conserving wildlife, engaging the public, ensuring the future. Lifeform Taxidermy, guardian of the hunter's dreams. Zambezi Delta Safaris, protecting wildlife, empowering communities, and defining adventure. Royal Outfitters UK, tradition in the field, excellence in the hunt. And Africa Sky Boutique Hotel, luxury, comfort, and true African hospitality, just minutes from Johannesburg's O.R. Tambo International Airport. Now, here's your host, Mike Arnold.
Welcome to Bringing Back the Wild. Today, we have a friend of mine on here who I've hunted with in various places around the world, including his own ranch in the hill country of Texas. But Dan Cabela joins us today, and I really appreciate you spending some time with us, Dan.
Absolutely, Mike. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to our conversation here today, and hope you had good holidays.
Someone asked me, was your Christmas Day busy? And I said, no, our kids come over on Christmas Eve. So we relax on Christmas Day. We're pretty much in our chairs, just chilling. Dan, you are a part of some of the biggest tapestries of conservation through hunting. You really are. You are one of the pinnacle players, I would call you, in this whole field. One of your big impacts comes from your TV show, Hard Truths of Conservation. And as I understand it, this weekend coming up, you have season 4 beginning of your TV show, Hard Truths. So congratulations, by the way. I know that it's now on Discovery Channel on Animal Planet, right? I wrote those two things down, is where it's appearing. I've kept track of it as it developed from seasons 1 through 3, but I'm really excited about this TV show because of the impact you're having on not only hunters, but non-hunters, and communicating to them the truth of conservation through hunting. Tell us about how in the world you got started in this TV show and its development, and then we'll get up to what's coming on this weekend.
Yeah, so ironically, it started in a place you're familiar with, Mozambique, and we were there in 2018 doing the relocation and reintroduction of lions to Coutada 11. And we were doing quite a bit of filming there for that, specifically for that project. Not really sure what we were going to do with that media, but wanted to capture what was going on there. And then one night we were sitting around the fire, and Ivan Carter and Sean Villa, it was pretty apparent to me that they had been talking separate from me, but they mentioned, you guys are doing, your foundation's doing these projects all over the place, and you're traveling the world and interested in conservation. What do you think about trying to create a TV show around this? And my response was, I don't really think I'm a TV show personality, but let's explain to me how this could work. So we talked about it. We decided to film a bison pilot not far from where I grew up in Nebraska. And so we filmed that pilot. Very talented team, came together quite nicely. I was very surprised, mostly by myself, not so much by their talents. But so we filmed that. Then unfortunately, COVID took the world by storm, and things were shelved for a good bit of time. I don't remember the exact amount of time, but a year or so. We were putting it out there, but nobody was really doing anything. And then I get a text one night from Ivan, and it says, history is interested. That's all the text says. And I look at it, history is interested. And so I text him back, History Channel question mark? He says, yes. So that was pretty unexpected. And that was really what got us our start. History Channel was great. We have moved on to Discovery Channel now, which has been a great relationship also. And season 4 starts this Sunday. It airs at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. And we hope people will tune in. But I guess our goal was never, I don't think we would have done the show if we didn't end up on History Channel or Discovery, a platform like that where we could reach an audience, a non-hunting audience. I think we are on some of the hunting channels, which is great. I love our community, but I think for it to make sense to us, we needed to somehow reach folks who maybe didn't understand how a lot of these things were taking place across the world and who was responsible for them. And that we're very fortunate and very appreciative that we have been given this type of platform to try and communicate some of the great work being done by not only the hunting community, but all the biologists and hunting outfitters and veterinarians and landowners and communities. The list goes on and on. There's so many people doing great work for wildlife across the world, and we feel compelled to tell that story.
Let me ask you a question about number one, I'll ask you a couple. Number one, were you surprised that non-hunting venues, channels were interested? And number two, why were they interested, if that makes sense? I know your beginning show, it gave them the flavor, but why in the world would a non-hunting channel want hard truths of conservation on their platform, I wonder?
To your first question, yes, very surprised, but very excited as well to be on a non-hunting platform. And I think there's a couple reasons why the show's been accepted into more mainstream platforms. And part of it is we have an incredible production team that tells these stories in a very entertaining and cinematic way. That helps big time.
Yeah.
But also the show is, the way it's designed is to present things to the viewer, but let the viewer decide if they think these are good things, or let the viewer be educated in what's going on, but let them make a decision. Is this good, what I'm seeing here, or is this not? We're not preaching, we're not pushing. We might be nudging slightly, but in the end, the viewer gets to decide the merit of the conservation actions that are taking place and who is responsible for these actions. And we leave it that way intentionally. And I often show more than one side to a conservation challenge. And that's why the names take hard truths, because there are some very hard truths out there for all of us to consider.
I was just chatting earlier on a podcast with a friend of yours as well, Joe Crute, and we were talking about the balance between culling and sport hunting to keep game populations in a balance so that those game, or especially if they're herbivores, but they could be predators, keep them in a balance so that they're not destroying their own habitats. And we were talking about that. How do you balance culling, where you're still utilizing the meat, et cetera, but also sport hunting? Because under sport hunting, we know that conservation occurs. And sometimes we probably have a few more white-tailed deer than we need in Georgia right now, for example. How do we deal with that when sport hunters can't actually keep the populations in check as much as they need to? And that's actually a hard question, because we don't want to go market hunting and go to extinction. And so anyway, it was interesting talking to him in his context in Scotland. Talk to us about the show that's coming up this weekend, because is it a full circle thing for you? Your first show is on bison.
Yeah, exactly. It is interesting that season 4 is starting with another bison episode, very different from the original episode. And basically, the show, it captures a lot of the elements strongly that we put in many shows. So you've got a relocation of a bison herd to an island off of Kodiak from Native American tribe that is trying to hold on to their traditions and their culture, but also are very remote. So they've got food security issues. Difficult. COVID's another example of that. They couldn't get any food in and out of there.
Wow.
And when they could, it was so expensive and most of it was out of date. So they moved this bison herd and it's flourished, and they sustainably harvest from this bison herd. And there's a science aspect as well. We collar some of these bison. It's a very unusual situation because it's an island and you've got bison interacting with brown bears, which there's a lot to be learned there, right? So there's a brown bear episode on that same island in this season where we call her brown bears as well. There's a lot to be learned there. And I think this one kind of covers the basis of many of the points that we try to get across in these episodes. And I think it covers them strongly, from sustainable utilization to science to culture and traditions and heritage. So I'm pretty excited that this is the first episode of this season, and hopefully it gets people hooked on watching some of the other ones.
Yeah, so I wanted to go back to that. So we've mentioned this is season 4. How many, you have 3 seasons, obviously. How many episodes do you have total?
There's 12 per season.
Okay.
So we're at 60 now. There are a couple of recuts. You mentioned Joe Crude. We are re-airing one of the shows that I did with Joe in a recut on Discovery. So there are a couple of recuts in there as well.
Yeah, what a beautiful area that you talk about cinema. Oh my goodness. Cinematography and photography in the Highlands of Scotland. You don't really go wrong with that.
No, that was a great trip. I really enjoyed my time there.
Yeah.
I think I'm going back in 2027 or maybe 2028.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be trying to hunt with him, just as an aside. This is family chat with you, but he's moving into Latvia. You probably know they're going to expand out, and that has such maybe you're thinking about going there. It has such an interesting hunting tradition where you have the hunting clubs that are doing the conservation work and protecting the habitats there, and their long legacy hunting clubs where father and son and grandfather, et cetera, are. So anyway, I'm looking forward to going there. Probably just hunt a roebuck, which I love hunting. But now,
yeah,
you mentioned introducing lions. Tell the folks about that who might not know that story. Hopefully they do, but might not know the story about your introduction of apex predators into Mozambique, into the hunting concession Coutada 11.
Yeah, back in 2017, we sold the family business. And my father had passed 3 years previously. And my mom was lost is probably a little strong because she was never really lost, but you could tell she needed something to keep her busy and to draw up some of her time, and because she was spending a lot of time alone. And so I started to try to put together some legacy conservation projects for the foundation. After we sold the company, we had decided to refocus on the foundation and pour our energy into that. And so we brought several projects to my mother. I'm 8 to 10 long-term projects. And the lion one really hit home with her. Immediately, you could tell that was the one out of several that we looked at that was the one that she wanted to do. And the nice thing about that is I was pretty comfortable, might be the strong word because there's a lot of risk involved in this. I was somewhat comfortable with the idea because I had been to Coutada 11. I knew the folks there. They weren't doing projects like this at that time, but you could tell there was a serious commitment to wildlife and conservation. And I really liked their approach to the management of that area and the holistic approach with the community and everything. So I was like, okay, I don't know if this can work or not, but if it can work, this is probably the place.
Yep.
And so that was how it all started. We tried to source 24 lions from Zimbabwe. Of course, that was right around the same time that Mugabe fell from power, which was a good thing, but it set us back because all of our permits went void when that happened. So we just came back together and had discussions and decided, let's try to source these lions from different reserves in South Africa. And so in 2018, we gathered up all these lions, took them to one holding boma in South Africa, and not too long after, a couple of weeks or so, we loaded them onto planes and flew them over to Mozambique, to Coutada 11. And it's been an amazing project. It's been life-changing for me personally. It's still to this day, even though it was our first big project, I still feel it's the most successful and meaningful one that I've been involved in. And this year, we were able to actually say that we now have over 100 lions in the Zambezi Delta. So we're very proud of the work that we've done there, and we're very proud of our partners. We've had great partners and things. There's been setbacks, but in all reality, I think things went as well as they could have. But it's been a resounding success.
As a biologist, I've told other people this same thing and actually written about you guys and the Cabela Family Foundation's commitment to this, and then Zambezi Delta Safaris, of course, and Ivan and everybody involved is amazing because reintroductions have a very high probability of failing. I'm not even talking about lions or whatever. I have done many reintroductions of plants, and those are straightforward because if you put them there and they're not there when you get back, you know they died. But and they're so complex. And I say that all with the context of y'all took a huge risk. You took a huge risk. Everyone across that landscape took a huge risk with that reintroduction. And it could have fallen. You knew, you said you were moderately, however you put it, comfortable. You knew it could fall flat. And yet y'all put the money in and you put the sweat equity and the boots on the ground. And boy, is it, like you said, it's something for y'all to be, a legacy to be so proud of. And the thing about the hunting, too, is that those lions will be hunted eventually, not the first 24, obviously, but now that the population is such, it's going to get to a demographic where it can be hunted. I'm not sure when, maybe the next year or two. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think there's ongoing discussions revolving around that, but there's a lot of prey in that area, a lot of prey species, but just like other places, I'm not going to mention, but there's been some other reintroductions where the lions have gotten out of control and now they no longer have the prey species they used to have. So there will need to be some management, but the best thing about the management of those lions is they will be able to fund their own conservation at that point.
Exactly.
And you won't need people like us and other folks that have contributed to pay for the conservation because the lions will be paying for it themselves.
Absolutely. Few people ever see what happens after the hunt ends. There are borders to cross, laws to follow, seasons, paperwork, inspections. Each step a place where life-form taxidermy protects against the loss of the precious trophy. With the right hands guiding the way, we leave nothing to chance. At Life-Form Taxidermy, expert knowledge of importing and exporting ensures the treatment of every trophy with the same care as the hunt itself. From the moment it enters the studio, the focus is singular. Immaculate condition, uncompromised detail, absolute integrity. And through it all, there's a conversation. Familiar voices, updates, reassurance. This isn't a transaction. It's a relationship built around trust, craftsmanship, and respect for what that trophy truly represents. Now, you guys are working with a few other reintroductions in there, a couple of other ones. Tell us about the cheetahs.
Yeah, so 12 cheetahs, that project, after the overwhelming success of the lions, we had done some research and found that the cheetahs had also existed there at one point and decided we would stay on the apex predator kick and relocate some cheetahs. Now, when we talk about risk, lions are kind of tanks. cheetahs are a little bit delicate. It's definitely been more challenging. We've had to augment the population a couple of times, but still very committed to it. The cheetahs are doing well. They've settled down. Initially, that they really wanted to migrate a bunch, and luckily there's such a strong commitment from ZDC that they were going and picking up cheetahs quite often, unfortunately sometimes having to remove snares and other things. But with that type of commitment, we've been able to keep that program on track as well. And last summer, we did a relocation of some hyenas into Coutada 11 as well. Some of the studies, since we put the lions down, we expected the hyena population to explode because of all the scavenging that would be available to them. But I'm not saying that they're not doing okay, because they are doing okay, but their numbers probably should be higher than they are. So we brought in a group of new hyenas, new genetics from a neighboring park. And so we've got some hyenas running around there now too. So we've been very heavily involved with the predators in the Zambezi Delta for sure.
Well, there's a lot of collars out there with Cabela written on them. Let's just put it that way. Have you been involved with the elephants and that sort of thing as well at all, or?
Just from a science perspective, the elephants and leopards there, we put some collars on. We haven't relocated. They've got a nice population of both of those species, but understanding the science, behavioral patterns, movements, it's quite interesting with the elephants there, because at one time they were thought to spend most of their time out in the Delta, but since collars have been being used, it's apparent that they're migrating back and forth quite a bit into the forest. And also from a human-wildlife conflict point of view, being able to recognize when these elephants are maybe getting into areas where there could be issues, and being able to go in there with a chopper and maybe push them away from communities and things like that is quite helpful. And also with the leopards, there's a lot of leopard studies going on right now, but I'd say it's still not a very well understood animal.
Yep.
So any science that can be gathered for leopards anywhere is critical to understanding their behavioral patterns and also informing the conservation going forward.
I think it's really on that point. I think it's very telling that when animal behavioralists go out and study apex predators, they're generally going to choose something like cheetahs or lions, or maybe even bears sometimes.
Yes.
And the reason is because the darn things are outside and you can see them. Leopards are hidden away so much of the time. Hyenas would be the same way, in all honesty. They're going to be tough. So what y'all are doing with collaring is going to be giving information. When I dug into the scientific literature on leopards, I found out really quickly that there was a lot less known, just like you just said. Yeah. What about other species there? Let's stay with Coutada 11 for a moment. Are there other plans that you can share that y'all are thinking about?
There's nothing on the radar right now, but things come up. The hyena thing came together fairly quickly. I'm not going to say that there's not going to be something that happens there, but we don't have any plans to do anything now other than to continue to support our ongoing efforts there.
All right. So I'm gonna reverse us for a moment, or jump back in your chronology. And I told you I might do this. How did you become a hunter? I know where you grew up, but tell folks about how that developed, because that was the start, presumably, of how you ended up being one of the premier hunting conservationists in the world. So how did that begin?
I grew up in a very rural area of Nebraska, and obviously giving away my age here a little bit, at that time, it was a much less distracting landscape. To get outdoors and do things was your entertainment. And mostly I got my start from my father, my brothers, my uncles, family hunting, not really big game hunting, mostly duck hunting, goose hunting, pheasant hunting, those type of things, rabbits. And I think initially, being a youngster, I mostly just wanted to be a part of that group. I wanted to be doing what the people were doing that I looked up to. And so that's where I got my start. I can remember sitting in the goose pit when I was very young, probably 6, 7 years old. And all the guys had their shotguns, and I had my little Daisy BB gun. And
I love
and
that.
they'd draw the lids back, and everybody would shoot, and I'd shoot my little BB, and they'd act as if I had taken down a bird. And I believed at that time that I had. And it's just funny looking back at how those guys just encouraged what's become a lifelong kind of obsession for me, starting with such a simple beginning. But that's really where it started. And conservation for me came quite a bit later. Really, in getting involved in conservation, really, for me, didn't start until I started traveling internationally, which would have been 1990-ish. And just when I started seeing things going on in marginal lands, mostly in the beginning would have been Africa, different places in southern Africa, and seeing the challenges that not only the wildlife was facing, but also the people. And just also coming across people with hunting backgrounds that were in various countries that were very committed to wildlife and conservation. And it just started to have an impact on me personally. And so I began a drive or desire in me to learn more about the whole process. And once again, a lot of things for me start on simple standards, but that's really what got me going down this path.
In terms of, I do this, and someone asked me this question, and I always feel like it's such an unfair question, but since I'm getting to ask the questions, I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you have a favorite place, a favorite species, this, and you've hunted so much that this really is an unfair question probably, but do you have, or maybe it's a type of hunt?
I get asked that question a lot, Mike, and I don't really have a favorite place. I think different types of hunts have different meaning to me personally. The challenging hunts, I think, stick with me the most. And I think because of the challenge is the reason. I think as far as like reflecting on things that maybe at moments where I thought maybe I couldn't do what I was doing and it ended up being successful. And I think that those type of memories probably stick with me the most. I would say probably sheep hunting and goat hunting at the top. But I would say as far as just fun and getting out in the field and having a great time and more of a social thing with family and learning about different environments, I'd have to put a lot of the hunts that I've done in Africa in that boat. So I think there's two different types of experiences for me, at least two, maybe more. And I think I have favorite moments more than favorite hunts or favorite animals.
Yeah. I think for me, it's the same way. And I reflect on what you talked about being in that goose pit. And I tell people my number one trophy to this day is a white-tailed doe I shot in the hill country back in 1962. You talk about dating yourself. I was 5, and I don't have her on the wall, unfortunately, but she was what welcomed me into that community. And I think that's what you're reflecting on in that goose pit. These giants, as Ruark would have called them, welcomed me into that community of hunters, big game hunters. And of course, that doe was probably the size of a jackrabbit back then in the hill country. So there wasn't any supplemental feeding for her. So I'm sure she wasn't very big. In terms of what's coming up for you this year, you want to run us through three of your trips that are coming up, I assume, for Hard Truths. I know what's coming up on season 4, but to begin with.
Yeah, season 4 starting, but we're filming season 5. And I just got back from Florida. We did a whitetail relocation down in Florida to some Native American lands down there in the Everglades, where a lot of mismanagement of water with city growth had flooded out a lot of areas, and places where there used to be plentiful deer had very low numbers of deer. And they've gone now and committed to fixing all that and are building some dams and different levees to address this issue. So we moved some deer in there, which was quite fulfilling. And then Saturday I leave for British Columbia to wrangle some moose to put some collars on them. I think it's 70 degrees outside here today, so I better enjoy that, because for the next 10 days or so, it's going to be a lot different.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, it's cool here, but it's not British Columbia cool in the wintertime. So where are you going to be? What are you in the mountains in British Columbia?
Yeah, but that's Babine Lake. The closest town would be Smithers.
Yeah. Yeah. We were in the Babine Lake area actually with Michael Schneider. I don't know if that's who you're going with, but anyway, with Michael with Driftwood Outfitters, and he works with the Takla Nation up there, but as well, Takla kids. But yeah, it's a beautiful area. But I know he's up there right now trapping wolves because of
Yeah.
predator control. And as far as I understood it, there was a lot of snow, Dan.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's gonna. I'll have to get reacquainted with those Nebraska temperatures that I grew up with.
One last thing, and I'm going to let you go. Tell us about your ranch there and your purpose for having a Sante, which I love. It's a home away from home. I've been there twice. I've told other people I've shot my largest whitetail on Dan Cabela's land. It's hanging right up here on the wall, I might add. But tell us about, because that has to do with game and species conservation, and also reintroductions that are being done around the world or coming from ranches like yours in Texas.
Yeah. So once again, we've got a theme here with me that a lot of things start with not incredible planning or thought and start very simple and turn into other things. So initially, when we bought this ranch, Darlene and I, well, it had cattle on it. And so you've got an ag exemption for your property taxes because of the cattle. You know, nothing against cattle, but you can get the same exemption if you put Springbok or Bongo or Addicts or something else on. And for me, I just would rather be looking at Springbok, Bongo, or Addicts. Cattle.
Me too.
So that was really the main reason that we started doing this. But as we slowly got into it, and we did go into it very slowly, I started to think about how much I enjoy being around wildlife and how much time I spend outside. And none of us are getting younger. And so I started to think that this is something that I could do pretty much till the day I die. And I won't have to travel all over the world, and I won't have to hike mountains. I can walk out my door and be out there with these animals and catch them and sell them and trade them and move them and also conserve them, because some of these animals that we raise are in danger. Dama gazelles and Addicts, scimitar, bongo. So also contribute back to the conservation of these animals. And I really enjoy it. I don't ever really walk away from this lifestyle. But when I'm home, it's just I'm really at home doing the same things that I'm doing when I'm traveling. So it's nonstop interaction with wild creatures for me. And it's really where I want to be. And I find it fulfilling. And I'm just very fortunate to be able to do this nearly every day.
And it really is true in terms of the conservation aspects of what you guys are doing on these. I didn't know as much about it when I first visited your ranch, about how game ranching really does contribute, because now they're reintroducing some of these incredibly rare and highly endangered forms back to their native habitats. And that's got to be, so even if it's not your animals, to be involved in that kind of a movement, I think it speaks volumes to what hunters really love doing, which is, like you said, seeing wildlife in their habitats and seeing wildlife in the wild, as opposed to, say, in a zoo or whatever. And so I'm blown away by what y'all are doing too. And of course, seeing those wonderful animals out there that I'd never seen before in my life, but I'd read about, is marvelous every time I visit. Dan, tell our listeners where they can find you and the foundation and that sort of thing, and stay abreast of what you're doing with Hard Truths, but also the foundation's work.
Yeah. So the foundation, the website is cabelafamilyfoundation.org. And then on Facebook and Instagram, it's the Cabela Family Foundation. And then I, of course, have a Dan Cabela page on Facebook and Instagram, and a Hard Truths page on Facebook. And as far as the show, it debuts this Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern on Discovery Channel. There are other showing times, but the debut will be for several weeks, 8:30 a.m. Eastern on Discovery Channel.
Okay. And they can, when they go to the Hard Truth site, they can plug into where they can also watch previous episodes, correct?
Yeah, it'll take you to the YouTube page.
Yep.
So you can find either off the website or on our YouTube page. And I didn't mention the website. The website is hardtruthsofconservation.com. Thank you for that, Mike. I missed that. But
No,
yeah, you can see all the first 3 seasons on YouTube, and you can click on the links on the website and it'll take you right there.
fantastic. Congratulations again, Dan, on 4 seasons in the can, as they say. And so filming on season 5, I'm really proud of what y'all are doing. Thank you for allowing us hunters to be involved in this. It is such a sweet TV program, but also all the other work by the foundation is marvelous. So thank you. And especially thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me on, Mike. It was great to catch up.
All right. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to Bringing Back the Wild. For more stories from the field, conservation-driven articles, and Mike's books, visit MikeArnoldOutdoors.com. Until next time, keep bringing back the wild.